Let's take a look at question 8586. It says, refer to figure 470. What are the V1 and VR speeds at 25 degrees Celsius at sea level for an aircraft weighing 54,500 pounds at a maximum V1 VR ratio of 0.93? So we only have this one chart, figure 470. And at first, we're going to go ahead and look through and highlight exactly what we need. I find that it always helps me to know what information I'm looking for at first. So I know right away I'm going to need an outside air temperature, a weight, a V1 VR ratio, and I will need some kind of airfield altitude. So we take a look at our question, and we can see that we're already given most of those answers. So we have our temperature here, our altitude, our weight, and the V1 VR ratio. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take a look, and I'm going to highlight right away my two reference lines. I find that this always helps me to remember to stop there, just so I don't forget. Now that those are highlighted, I'm going to start by entering the chart at 25 degrees Celsius. Remember, for all of these, we're just following the example, and in case you forgot, that example is right here. It's these black arrows that have been drawn out for you. Okay, so I'm going to take that away. And now we're going to start by entering the graph at 25 degrees Celsius. Notice that you have negatives on the left and then positives on the right. So 25 degrees Celsius is about here. And then let's take a look at this symbol or this graph inside the graph real quick. I just want to point something out. So this square here, this rectangle, each line shows you exactly what it's talking about. So this is sea level, this is 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet, and that's all talking about the airfield altitude. So if you get a question that asks you what the problem is, including 4,000 feet of altitude, you would be taking it to this line here. The other thing that's interesting about this chart is occasionally you will be given an ISA temperature rather than an outside air temperature. And those are just their corresponding lines as well. So that's plus 35, ISA plus 30, ISA plus 20, so on and so forth. If you get a question that, let's say, tells you the airport pressure altitude is 6,000, so you're looking at this line, and ISA is plus 20, you're going to find where those lines intersect, and that will be your reference to begin your chart. We do not have the ISA temperature, though, so we can kind of come up from where we had our 25 degrees Celsius, and we're going to bring that to sea level. So I'm going to bring that line just straight up to sea level. And then I'm going to follow my example by bringing that line over directly to my next reference line. And now it looks like I'm going to have to account for my weight. So I'm going to go ahead and do what I enjoy doing, which is draw my own reference line. Note that on the inside, this is your weight in kilograms, and this is your weight in pounds. So our question is asking us to account for 54,500 pounds. So this is 54,000, this is 56,000. So I'm going to say 54,500 is right about there. And I am going to draw myself my own reference line. Boop. Thank God for the iPad. And then I'm going to follow my example that's already been drawn out. And I'm going to go ahead and take this line up. I'm going to go ahead and take this line up to where that weight meets. So right about there. And I made my pen a little thicker so I can see this easier. And now once I get to that spot, I'm going to drag this over to my next reference line all the way over here. Once I'm at that reference line, I now need to consider my V1 VR ratio. And remember, that was 0.93. So I'm going to make myself another reference line at 0.9123. So right about here, just so I know where to end that line. I'm going to draw that straight up. And then I'm going to follow exactly what my reference line had been telling me, or my example had been showing me before. I'm going to take this line back to where it meets, and I'm going to try my best to follow this angle. And then I'm going to take that directly over. So here, looking at the chart, there's no notes we need to consider. We're just trying to find our answers. So notice that over here, this is V1. So I know our answers are to the left, but I'm going to say V1 is probably about 113. And that's just without looking at my answers. Next, I'm going to go ahead and try and find VR. And VR is actually in the middle of the chart. So VR is here. And you're looking at this line of numbers. So wherever your line had crossed. And I'm going to say that's about 121. So I'm going to call VR 121. So let's look at our answer choices. It's asking me a V1 VR ratio, which means the numbers on the left are V1 and the numbers on the right are VR. So looking at that, you have 110 and 114. Well, if I look at my chart, I know that VR is way above 114. 114 would be down here, so that doesn't really make sense. I have 112 and 121. That aligns almost perfectly with what I've decided. And then we'll check one more, 97 and 102. Well, again, 97 would be way down here for V1, so that doesn't make any sense. So my correct answer would be B. And remember, you won't always get perfect answers. You'll probably never get a perfect answer, but it's pretty close.